Welcome to the Harworth Brass Podcast. With your host, Pete.
Welcome to the Harworth Brass Podcast, and this is a very special episode for us. Episode 7 is one we've been incredibly excited about because for the very first time on the podcast, we are joined by a truly world-renowned professional soloist. Our guest today has taken the euphonium to concert halls across the globe, inspired generations of players, recorded extensively, and helped redefine what the instrument can do. We are absolutely delighted to welcome Steven Mead. In part 1, we're going right back to the beginning, Steve's early musical journey, how he found the euphonium, and of course, a very special memory for us at Harworth Brass when he did his solo appearance in the late 90s at the Majestic Theatre in Retford, including a duet with our now musical director, Claire Cowan. So, Steve, welcome to the Harworth Brass Podcast.
Thank you very much, Pete. Really, really good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. You actually began as a singer before becoming a brass player. How did that early vocal training influence the way you approach phrasing and tone on the euphonium?
Yeah, so my singing, well, it wasn't really a singing career. I started by singing, and my parents organized lessons for me from about the age of 5 up until when my voice broke, you know, as it does, 12 and a half. And so, yeah, I was singing all the time, singing in choirs, singing solos, especially at the Salvation Army where I grew up. I was regularly on my feet on a Sunday afternoon, singing solos. Oh, what a lovely voice he has, blah, blah, blah. And I was playing brass, but I wasn't, I guess from about the age of 8 or 9, I was getting more passionate about brass. I started on cornet, but that didn't last long. That was taken away, and I was given tenor horn, then baritone, and then euphonium about the age of 11. So I guess I realized by around that point that there were many connections between singing and playing a brass instrument, you know, using good breath, projecting the sound, articulation. It was only really once my voice broke and my soprano voice kind of disintegrated into the kind of grumbling voice you hear now, which is like tenor baritone. It was only then I realized that the euphonium was the most unique voice. It had this amazing color, and you could make it human. You know, you could use vibrato to really make it sing. And the nicest thing people say, oh, you know, the instrument sounds like an extension of you. Well, the voice was part of me. And I stopped singing really about the age of 13, never to be done again. Although I do sing a lot in lessons, you'll never hear me singing in public. There's always been a connection. You know, I've done seminars in America and different places about the connection between singing technique and brass technique. And it goes from the most basic level of, you know, think of the sound, take a breath and make it happen, to actually controlling line and how you end phrases and how you use different consonants and vowels in singing to make it more interesting. I've always tried to be an interesting brass player, and that stems from singing, I guess. And because those years from the age of 5 to 10 are so important formatively, you know, you're kind of set. What you do after that stems back to those critical years. Yeah,
absolutely. So do you remember the exact moment you realized music wasn't just going to be a hobby, but it was actually going to be your life?
I do. I mean, it was during my early teens. You know, I was at Bournemouth School for Boys, which was ostensibly a very academic school, although I wasn't particularly academic. I did okay. I was always in kind of the middle of the class rather than top or bottom. But I love music. Music was my life. You know, every Monday night I had singing lessons. Tuesday night was school orchestra. Thursday night, junior band practice. Friday night, I'd go and hear Boscombe Band in the summer at Fisherman's Walk. Often playing in concerts on Saturday, and then Sunday was all-day music at the Salvation Army. So I knew that music was going to be part of it. My brother and sister were both amateur musicians. Dad played the tenor horn in the band. Mum used to sing a little bit. And so I remember very clearly, I was about 14 or 15. We had a career session at school. And the teacher, Mr. Maxted, said, okay, Mead, so yes, you're a musician. So what will you do for a job? And I just looked at him and I said, I'm going to play euphonium, sir. And he looked in his little book, his observer's book of careers.
Yeah.
Couldn't find the word euphonium, but found brass. He could see trombone and tuba. He said, no, I think you'll have to change. And I looked at him and said, no, I don't think so. But in a way, he had a point, because at that point, that was around 1977, 78. Goodness me.
Yeah.
It was really hard. Unless you were going to sign up and play in a military band, you didn't have a hope in hell of earning a bean playing the euphonium, you know? And I couldn't understand that. It was around that time, you know, a few years later, I joined the National Youth Brass Band. I heard all these incredible players, you know, mainly from the north of England, but not exclusively. Yeah. And I thought, well, what is it about this instrument that is so incredible, but nobody earns any money from it? It was well, still was a bit of a mystery to me. Not so much now, because I understand it, but yeah. So I knew at that point that I was going to have a bit of a battle on my hand, even from the age of 15, you know. So I kept practicing. I got all my grades. I started doing concerts. I joined Boscombe Salvation Senior Band, and you know, I met people like Eric Ball. I met other greats in the band world, and my first concert with Boscombe Band as a soloist, age 17, Eric Ball was the speaker, and he did this long sermon, like 25 minutes. You could hear a pin drop. And he said, right, and now the band is going to play, and young Steven Mead is going to play Ransomed, you know. And after sitting there for half an hour thinking, oh my God. Well, not literally, but and that was it. So I knew that I could play. I knew that I wasn't a simple guy. I knew I could, you know, maybe open some doors. So, but then the next step was going to university, you know, and I applied to the Royal Academy, who offered me a place on tuba. I applied to the Goldsmiths College in London. They offered me a place on trombone, although they never heard me play trombone. Euphonium second study. So all the doors were kind of closed, you know, in terms of that. I knew I wanted to play in a brass band, but I was also smart enough to know that that would never pay for my mortgage or run a car or and all that stuff. So I ended up going to Bristol University to do a music degree, but not really centered on the euphonium. It was, but I met people like Derek Bourgeois. He was my personal tutor for 2 years, and he picked up the phone, go here, went to London for lessons with John Fletcher, the famous tuba player. John Iveson, the trombone player, gave me lessons because Derek picked up the phone. So, you know, I knew I wanted to be a euphonium player, but I didn't know how I was going to get there, you know. And then joining Desford Band when I left college was amazing, because the band was on the up. You know, Howard Snell was the king of the castle then, with his arrangements and just the way he was. So he became a big mentor to me, and he guided me through. I became a high school teacher in Burton-on-Trent, run the school bands. It wasn't a brass teacher. I was there as the school teacher, but run the junior band, the school senior band, produced shows, ran the recorder ensemble, the string orchestra, get that. And and I did that for about 6 years full time, and then the headmaster, Brian Hughes, was an amazing guy, Welshman, loved bands and choirs and sport. He let me reduce my timetable because I was starting to travel everywhere. So it was like a transition from being a very keen, crazy keen amateur player with a day job as a school teacher to gradually transitioning where I could just play every day. So I had to be patient. You know, there was like a 12-year waiting game. And being patient is not terribly popular these days, but I knew that I'd get there eventually. So,
so obviously you experimented with lots of different brass instruments then early on. What is it about the euphonium that made it feel like home then?
Wow, what a question. It's hard to explain really, but when I was 10 or 11, playing quite nicely in the junior band, and my sister gave me a record. We all remember them. For Christmas, and it was the Hendon Band with euphonium soloist Barry Perrins, and on that album was him playing harmonious blacksmith variations. And he had quite a pronounced vibrato, but a very silky sound. And I heard this really laser clear technique and pomp, and I thought, I can do that. I got the music. I played along with the record. Yeah. I must have worn the damn thing out, wearing big white headphones. And so, I fell in love with the fact that the euphonium was very close to the voice. As I say, my voice my soprano voice had broken. It went south and didn't really land anywhere. And I just thought the euphonium was an amazing instrument. I had a few, as a young teenager, I had 3 euphonium players that I idolized. I guess in my heart of hearts, I still do, and they're all still with us, thank goodness. John Clough at Black Dyke, Lyndon Baglin at Sun Life and various other places, and of course Trevor Groom. And it was my lessons with Trevor Groom. I started taking lessons around the age of 17. I was a young kid on the south coast in Bournemouth, and of course Trevor was up in Kettering. But I met him at a concert that I did near Kettering with Boscombe Band, played a solo. He came backstage and said, "Well done, young man. That's, really nice. Thank you so much." And all I could say was, "Trevor, can I have some lessons?" It just came out,
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, lad, if you're keen enough to come up and see me from Bournemouth, and we did it for about 2 years, about every 2 or 3 weeks, get on the train at Bournemouth, change in London, go up to Kettering. He'd pick me up from Kettering Station, take me to the Salvation Army Hall, and we would play for 2 hours. And I don't remember much about what he said, except he was encouraging, but I remember his sound, and I remember watching him breathe and how he formed the embouchure, and the fact that he was always saying, that's good, lad, but try that with stronger articulation. Let's try that slower. Let's try that with more expression. And the one thing I do remember, he said, because he was also in and out of the Salvation Army, he said, when you're playing, especially technical music, take care of all the short notes, because I remember the expression, you never know which one of those notes is going to give somebody a blessing. It was just something that stuck in my head. So when I'm playing fast stuff, be it a modern piece or one of the traditional pieces, you take care of all the details. You don't let anything slide through, because that could be the thing that people don't catch and don't enjoy your performance. So Trevor was encouraging. He didn't know the route ahead for me, because I was 17, and I say the doors really didn't open till I was like 27, 28. But he's told people since that he realized that I could play, and he said to several people he didn't feel he ever taught me anything, but that's so wrong.
He taught you a lot by the sounds of it.
Just that complete association with the instrument. Every breath he took was to do with playing the instrument. I have so much to thank him for. So when I went off to university, I didn't have a euphonium teacher. I kind of felt I had enough knowledge in my backpack already. And I was, a highly motivated kid. I wanted to join a band. I joined Sun Life Band and played there with them a couple of years. We had Walter Hargreaves conduct us. And then when I finished teacher training college in Bath, the telephone rang one night and they said, "Stephen, it's a Mr. Snell on the phone." And it's like, oh my goodness. And that was it. 6 months later, I was staying at his house in Hollington near Cheadle, and doing a job application for teaching, and joined Desford Band. And and then so I was then being a high school teacher and playing in Desford Band at the same time. I bought a house halfway between the band room and the school. I mean, life was very simple,
Yeah. Definitely.
So no, I mean, I think, although I felt that the odds were stacked against me, I just knew that if I kept playing well, sooner or later something would happen. I had that belief, and
Yes.
And the big breakthrough actually was 1989. I got a phone call from Harold Nash, who was head of brass at the Royal Academy of Music. And he said, "Oh, hello, Stephen, it's Harold Nash. I wondered if you'd like to come and do a recital." Well, 10 years ago, they told me that they wouldn't accept me on euphonium. So I thought, what's going on here? What kind of setup is this, So I went there, did a recital, full-length recital, and the hall, a lot of people. Horowitz was in the hall, Eddie Gregson was in the hall, and I played a full hour-and-a-half program. It seemed to go pretty well. A week later, they said, would I like to start teaching, do some teaching there? They said, we don't really have euphonium players, we have trombone players that need to learn euphonium. And pretty much around the same time, I got a similar call from the Birmingham Conservatory, from the Royal Northern, and the Scottish Academy. So that was my exit route to high school teaching, because suddenly I had 4 days teaching at 4 major schools in the UK, and I tried to do all of them actually for about 4 years, and then I concentrated on Birmingham and Manchester. Birmingham Conservatory, the Royal Birmingham Conservatory, as it's now called, is actually closest to me. It's within half an hour.
Right.
But I was drawn, and still am, to the RNCM in Manchester, because it's just an unbelievably great school. It's right in the heart of the brass band movement. And my accent changes as soon as I get off the train in Manchester. I become a man. It's happening right now. I become a Mancunian. So, and I've loved that. I've been there nearly 36 years as a euphonium teacher at the Royal Academy and at the Royal College, Royal Northern College. And I have so many great students. You look at most of the euphonium players in the top bands in Yorkshire and Lancashire, they all went through the RNCM. So So it's been a long journey, but it was the sound of the euphonium that hooked me in. I mean, okay, playing high, playing pedal tones, playing the fastest pieces on earth, are fun, but that's not why I chose the instrument. It was just that mellow sound that, I go around the world and playing for people that really don't know the euphonium, and they come up and say, I've never heard, what's it called again? Euphonium. Oh, and there was a lady in Stuttgart. I did a concert with the orchestra in Stuttgart, 2007, big new concerto. And it had been a battle to get the orchestra to accept me as a soloist, because they commissioned Rolf Rudin, German composer, to write a concerto. Right. And then they said, well, what concerto is it going to be? And he said, a euphonium concerto. And they basically said, what the hell is that? And anyway, 2 years later, a year and a half later, there I was on stage with the Stuttgart Philharmonic. And concert went really well, packed house. I was nervous as hell, but really it was good. I was happy with it. And backstage afterwards, at the intermission, I played just before the intermission, I was carrying some flowers, and this old lady rushed backstage, and she said, "You're the man with the euphonium." Yes, that's right. She said, I'm really disappointed. I'm really unhappy. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. What's the problem?" She said, "No, you don't understand. I've been coming to this hall for nearly 50 years. I'm an old woman now, and only now do I hear your beautiful instrument." She just couldn't understand how she'd been listening to the symphony orchestra for nearly 50 years. She was now 75. And she just loved the sound of the euphonium so much. And she felt cheated that she hadn't heard it before. So I know, from traveling and playing for people for decades now, that people love the sound of the euphonium. So, it
is a lovely sound, the euphonium.
Yeah, it is. It is when it's played well, when you when you fill it with air, when you practice carefully and learn to project the sound rather than just blow into it, So, I mean, these really interesting times of trying to show people what the euphonium was. In the UK, we kind of know, but it's very limited in this country to either being in a military band or playing your heart out in a brass band.
Yes.
There's the professional side, which of course has its own rigors. Not everyone is cut out to be in a military band. The discipline, the fitness, the marching, all that stuff. Some people, fantastic. I have students come to the RNCM saying, in 4 years' time, I want to join the Royal Marines or the British Army. And that's a nice, easy route. And the military bands are great at encouraging students. They provide bursaries, give them some money, they train them and so forth. So
they do, yeah.
But I would like now, my studio in Manchester is really international. Half of my students come from way outside the UK. So we're training these guys and girls to go back in 2 years or 3 years and really then promote the euphonium just as heavily, when they go back to Taiwan or Hong Kong or China or wherever they're coming from. It's a pretty amazing world, the euphonium.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about how nice the euphonium sound is. You've always been known for your lyrical playing. Was that something that came naturally to you, or did you consciously develop that style?
Yeah, it's a good question, Pete. I think because I felt that I had good training as a musician and I listened a lot. I think that was the key. I wasn't just someone who sat in a room and worked out how to crank out a million notes. Is that I was brought up singing in a choir, playing in a very good Salvation Army brass band. I learned to, pick up. The band used to sing, and very often they would make up their own harmonies. It was just sitting next to people that were not really professional musicians, but could harmonize a tune. Any tune in the hymn book, the guy next to me could sing a tenor part or make up a bass part, And my grandfather used to play the piano, and so he used to come round our house after the Sunday morning service, and while the dinner was being cooked, the lunch was being cooked, he'd sit at the piano and improvise on some of the songs he'd heard in the church service, and I tried to copy him. When he'd gone in the afternoon, I'd play the tune and I'd work out the harmony, and so I lived music, and I think, when I was playing, all through my banding, and hopefully now also, I feel that I'm using the instrument like a voice, rather than a weapon. So and all the singing characteristics of vibrato and phrasing and articulation that comes with it, and those three guys that I mentioned, Trevor, John Clough and Lyndon Baglin, I used to study their recordings in microscopic detail. And I say I studied with Trevor. I must have played the Horowitz concerto that was written for Trevor. I must have played that 1,000 times in my life. And whenever I play the second movement, I've got Trevor's tone color in my head. So, you try to embrace everything that you've learned. If I listen to recordings I did in 1990 and 2006 and 2012, there was an evolution, but I would still recognize my sound in less than 3 seconds.
Brilliant. Let's go back to the late 90s. You were actually performed with our band Harworth Brass at the Majestic Theatre. Do you remember anything about that concert?
Well, I'd done so many concerts. What was the hall?
It was the Majestic Theatre in Retford. You actually performed a duet with my sister, who is now the actual musical director of the band, on that evening. And if I'm not mistaken, you performed the Pearlfishers. Yes.
There aren't many euphonium duets that you can just pick up and stand up with somebody in the band. So it's a short list of about 4. So, but Well, if I was to visualize the hall again, memories come flooding back. I've done done about 40 concerts a year for 30 years. In different places. But I hope it was a good concert. I hope people enjoyed it. And The fact that
I do remember it was a good concert, and I tried to get my sister on here, but unfortunately she's busy doing her musical stuff with her school today. But she did turn around and say that it was such an honour back then for her to play a duet with yourself, and she's gutted that she couldn't be here today, but she did want me to say that she was very honoured to play that duet with you.
Well, please send her my best. I mean, she'll hopefully hear this recording at some point, but yeah, nice memories. Nice that
absolutely
about it. Yeah.
So how did concerts like that back then, working with community bands, shape your development as an international soloist?
Well, music is music, and music is about people, so
absolutely.
It never really bothered me if I was doing a solo with a 4-section band or a 1st section band or championship band or anywhere in the world. I'm not really I'm not a musical snob. I like working with professional bands because they play so good and we can rehearse quickly and efficiently. But I love actually working with amateur bands because they actually get excited about putting on a big concert, and they get nervous and they take pictures afterwards. Professional players just go home,
Yeah, we're actually in the midst of doing one at the moment. We've got a big concert that we're putting together next month, and it's a night at the movies.
It's fantastic.
So we're playing about 16, 17 pieces of film music. Yeah.
Well, when I was a high school teacher, my school band, we did some amazing projects, and the sense of anticipation in the corridors of school leading up was amazing. Everybody wanted to talk about it. We did Russia with Love. We did all sorts of amazing projects. Sometimes we took over the whole of Burton Town Hall, and then you had like 60 sets of parents that were also buzzing about it, and their friends and their siblings, and I still get a kick out of that. I love being part of that. I think, I've played with some really great professional wind orchestras, military bands around the world, and it's an honor to play with them. And the level is high, and, it's all very professional, but it's the world of music, the full gamut of things that I think it makes it so unique. It's
definitely.
It's like a sport, except you can play it with everyone, If you take a really great professional footballer, they may do a bit of grassroots stuff, but generally, they're so focused on the training and the match day and, the press stuff afterwards. I think as a musician, you have to keep grounded and also for me, where I've come from, last weekend, I was playing one of the concerts celebrating the 140th anniversary of Boscombe Salvation Army Band.
Yes.
And I was guest soloist on the Sunday afternoon. It was wonderful. I mean, I'm 64 now, but I would say a third of the YP band when I was there they were in the audience, and we're all older and lost our hair and all that kind of stuff. Well, not the women, but it's really special, about being part of that community and honoring it and saying thank you. And when I was working with Trevor, I took lessons with Trevor Groom for more than 2 years, and every Saturday I'd offered him some money in an envelope that my parents had prepared, and not once did he accept it.
Oh, bless.
Every week he would say, "No, lad, if you're keen enough to come up all this way, I'm not going to take your money." Now, how many brass teachers would say that nowadays?
Not many.
Not many. But he is and was a 1 in a million. He was every week. Every week I would go home. I said, "Trevor hasn't he?" "Oh, he should take it." It was, but he never did. I got all his wisdom and experience and his care, and never took any money. So that's not a rationale for brass players to do. You can't do everything for nothing.
No, of course not. I'm going to say the UK brass band scene in the 90s had a unique energy, I think. What made that era special from your perspective?
Yeah, the 80s and the 90s. I joined Desford Band in 83 and I left in 89. And then in the 90s, I was doing a little bit with GUS Band and then had a nice contract with CWS Glasgow Band, along with my good friend Roger Webster. We used to go up there for about 6 years, unbelievably, as kind of guest principals. It was a vibrant scene for lots of reasons. I believe this current period, now that we've got over the pandemic, is also vibrant. I feel the last year and a half, there's a real passion again about banding. Numbers at contests are up. Bands are doing tryout concerts. They're collaborating more. I think it's fantastic.
Absolutely.
I still think there's inherent dangers that we basically only play for each other. We can't reach out because in a way our art, our sport is getting further and further away from what the media would call mainstream music, streaming stuff. But maybe we're still the ones that are doing it right because we're part of the community rather than digital streaming, this, that, and the other, and all about 3 or 4 American companies making a ton of money while the rest of us have to say okay. It's like the recording business that I was part of. But the 90s were great. I would say from the middle 80s and through the 90s, because I don't know, we had so many great people on the scene, so many amazing personalities conducting bands. Sadly, a lot of them have passed on now, but real characters that had humor, had passion. I'm not saying they're not there now, but it certainly seemed a different time, as you're alluding to.
100%.
I'm not sure. I think each period has its amazing attributes, and I think we should just recognize those and enjoy them. I mean, if you look now, what's great about UK banding? Well, I think the community activity is enriched. Post-pandemic, people want to get out. They want to learn new hobbies. People that haven't played for a few decades are going back to instruments. There's so many amazing youth projects, community projects. Brass Band England is now an active and living force when it wasn't really, back then. I see, things like the RNCM Brass Band Festival, an incredible showcase of the sharp end of music, brass band music, in terms of, modern composers and I think and to have 6-7 bands under one roof for a weekend is amazing. Some things in the band world, we've lost different contests, different funding things of course, some issues, and there was a period, of course, in the 90s where the lottery funding gave almost every band that filled in the forms right a new set of instruments. So that was all,
We were one of them.
Yeah,
we were one of them. I remember we got that, and all these new instruments turning up. It was fantastic.
Yeah, well, I even then I had a strong connection with Besson, with Boozy and Hawkes Musical Instruments, as was, and I would go there and every month to test instruments, and they say, well, we've got 5 more band set orders come in, lottery money, and it was like, oh my goodness, they were really at full production. And I remember very clearly saying then, okay, guys, but you got to don't get complacent about the quality, because unfortunately they did. Some of the lacquer stuff, there was big complaints about lacquer coming off instruments and instruments that were not really finished off well. So in the end, sadly, that did for Boozy and Hawkes Musical Instruments in Edgware and Croxley Green, and they got swallowed up. And once a month I go to Germany to test euphoniums and baritones in the German factory. So life goes on, but like you say, I think we're in a pretty good period now. I tell you what I do miss, and that is any kind of public forum now. You remember in the old days where everybody used to read Brass Band World, and everybody used to read the British Bandsman. And there were letters to the editor every week in the case of the British Bandsman. You could actually follow, if you like, discussion about things, and people talk about it. And now you're just talking about one or two internet forums, you know.
Yes.
They can be pretty rough places to exist, where everybody, you know, throwing mud at each other sometimes. So I miss those old debating points that people could talk about, and the following week somebody quite eminent would chip in a debate, you know, and somebody, you know, even on the subject of the rather thorny subject of brass band adjudication, you know, we're now at a fairly good status quo. I think generally speaking, we get better adjudications than we got 10, 15 years ago. The Association of Brass Band Adjudicators has got their act together. They're not, for me, they're not forward looking enough, but they've created a nice level of stability. They have training programs for young adjudicators, continually trying to evolve. You know, they don't particularly like my criteria-based judging system, but that's okay. It's in the wings waiting in case somebody really wants to take it up. But yeah, I think the 90s was exciting because we had media stuff as well, you know.
Absolutely, yes. Completely agree.
When we had, you know, it was gone by the 90s, but BBC Best of Brass, Granada Band of the Year, those were really vital, you know, avenues. You know, I suppose I made my fame in the BBC Best of Brass, winning the solo prize twice with two different bands. That kind of set my career up, you know. And what do you do now? You have to win a solo prize at the British Open. I guess, you know, it's just all in-house now rather than public, you know. But,
well, absolutely. I mean, that goes into my next bit. I mean, obviously winning competitions and gaining recognition early in your career, obviously that must have opened doors. But did that bring pressure as well as opportunity?
Well, I think the more you gain popularity, notoriety, then the level of expectation does come. Yeah, sure. But I used to revel in that when I was young. You know, when Desford Band used to go and do a weekend in Belgium or something like that, you know, just loved the buzz of being in a band that was winning, you know, even getting off the bus at the Royal Albert Hall and people say, oh, that's Desford Band, you know. And I did that when I was a kid. When I was 12 years old, I used to hang around door number 1 at the Albert Hall to see Black Dyke get off the bus and watch them go in, you know. I remember standing there with my dad and I said, there's John Clough getting off the bus. And he walked past us, he was chatting with somebody and he was effing and blinding for about a minute. And I thought, oh, and my dad said, oh, some choice words there. But on stage, they were absolute gods in that period.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Just the integrated sound of the band, the sweetness, the you know, all the really good things about banding was in that Black Dyke Band of the, you know, the late 70s. It was
of course.
Just phenomenal. Yeah. Yeah. So no, winning competitions help me tremendously. They do, you know, as they do for all young players now. You know, if you win a Jeju competition, you are quite likely to become an artist for that instrument company. If you're like, there was a Japanese guy who won it and he got an instant promotion in the Japanese military and so forth and so forth, you know. So no, we should have, you know, relish the opportunity. And now I try to prepare students to do these competitions and exams. So, and yeah, with it came a responsibility and a little bit of pressure. But if you're going to be a professional soloist and you can't deal with the pressure, then please go and do something else because it'll end up hurting you, you know.
Well, we're nearly at the end of part 1, but I'm just going to do a little bit of a fun segment, kind of back to the 90s. What piece instantly takes you back to the 90s?
Oh, gosh. You mean like a test piece or?
Anything. So it could be a solo, it could be a test piece, or it could just be a general concert piece.
Yeah. Well, That's a really good question. Goodness me. I mean, I tend to think back to test pieces that I've enjoyed, you know.
Yeah.
I know it's a little bit earlier, but I've always liked Philip Sparks' music, and I premiered in the 90s his first euphonium concerto in Japan with Philip in the audience. That was amazing.
Oh, wow.
And I remember, of course, his harmony music, which for me was a groundbreaking test piece. This was 87, so it's a little earlier.
Yeah.
But you know, where the composer asks euphonium players to play up to top E in a cadenza, never been done before. It broke some people. And all Howard Snell's arrangements and compositions. That's yes, from that what I remember. And playing some of them, you know, for the first time, going on tour to Switzerland, and people hearing this. The use of percussion in bands in the 1990s was really phenomenal. You know, if you're talking about general concert stuff, probably the pieces that we played then, we also played in the 80s and probably in the 70s, you know. So I don't. So the 90s for me was a year where the decade where I started traveling. So in 1990 was my first trip to the United States. 1991 was my first trip to Japan. And in, you know, Brass Band of Battle Creek started in 1992. And I've been going out there ever since, you know, 35 years as solo euphonium with that most amazing band. And for me, working with Battle Creek was to start to feel the real potential of fantastic big band jazz arrangements for brass band, which the Americans do really, really, really well.
They do, yes.
You know, the first big concert I did with them as a band was probably around 94. And then we had the Sing, Sing, Sing album, which was around the same time, where when you get half the band who can improvise and 3/4 of the band who understand all these styles, that was amazing. I think the 90s for me was characterized by twice-a-year trips to Japan, working with bands there and recording, and the global reach of brass bands, you know, with the Brass Band of Battle Creek. So, and I was still doing stuff with CWS Glasgow and Roger Webster, and you know, in 93 we had a guest conductor of Franz Violette from Brass Band Willowbrook, who's still going. Still,
wow.
He got helped to get Grimethorpe qualified last weekend, 2 weekends ago, at Huddersfield. He came and guest conducted, and he's still got the magic. You know,
brilliant.
European champions, Brass Band Willowbrook. You know, so these characters and geniuses we have in the brass band movement, still we still have a lot, even if some of our favorites from the 1890s are no longer with us or no longer active. Yeah.
So just one last question. If 90s Steven could see 2026 Steven, what do you think he'd say?
Amazing you're still going, Steve. Well, I think 1990 Steve was a young man embarking on a professional career with euphonium, with dreams and ambitions, and you know, here we are, more than 25 years later, and I feel I've done most of the things I wanted to do. So I still enjoy it, and I still want to keep doing it. I'm off to Thailand shortly to play at a brass festival. So I'm practicing every day. I should be practicing all afternoon, and I still love it. Practice has never been a chore. So in a way, Pete, not much has changed. 1990s Steve was a young guy, still with some hair, you know, going out, getting on planes, playing the euphonium, having finished my Desford career, you know, in 89. So no, I think he would say, keep going, because you've always wanted to do this. And when it's time for you to hang it up, hopefully you'll know about it, you know? So,
really? Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Steve, That's been brilliant, hearing about your journey from the early beginnings right through to, for us, that special night that you performed with our band at the Majestic Theatre. But we're not done yet. In part 2, we're going to dive into the global stage, international tours, recordings, teaching at the highest level, your recent USA tour, and what life looks like today as one of the most respected euphonium soloists in the world. So stay with us. This is the Harworth Brass Podcast, and we'll be right back. Special night at the Majestic Theatre in Retford, including that memorable duet with our musical director, Claire. Now, in part 2, we zoom out to the global picture. We're talking international tours, major recordings, teaching at the highest level, the evolution of the euphonium repertoire, and his recent tour in the USA. This is the life of the modern world-renowned soloist. So you now perform across Europe, the USA, and Asia regularly. When did international touring first become part of your life?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess my earliest touring was when I left the National Youth Brass Band. I was 18, 19, and quite a few of us left the band around the same time. And so there was this band called the Young Ambassadors Brass Band. It's still going, I believe.
Right.
But the instigator was Frank Wolf with his daughters Elaine and Marilyn. And we had a full-size band made up of players from most of the top bands, young players aged between like 17 and 28, I guess. And we started going into the Netherlands and Belgium and Germany, like holiday weekends. So that got a real buzz for me for traveling. And a lot of the people would say, look, you know, could you come back and play with our band? And so it was like what we call the Benelux countries, I suppose, was my early traveling. But I did a summer school in Spain near Valencia, which was really cool to do that. Just on my own with trombone teachers and trumpet teachers from around the world. And then, the world just kind of opened up. And 1990 was an important period because I say that was my first trip to United States. So a guy called Jerry Young, who's still around, thank goodness. He was the editor of the Tuba magazine, Tuba's Universal Brotherhood Association, as it was called then. Bit of a male-orientated title. But anyway, he invited me and said, look, we've put together a package. My very first concert, it was in June 1990, was with the U.S. Army Band in Washington, D.C. on the steps of the Capitol building. And I just got off the plane 2 days before. American Airlines had lost my suitcase. Fortunately, I had my euphonium with me in the gig bag. And there we were. My clothes turned up about half an hour before the concert. It was boiling hot. It was 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
And thunderstorms were around. And it was surreal. There you see the famous Capitol building, the amazing Army Band, and I'm playing a piece called Rondo by Claude T. Smith. That was my first American experience. So I did that, and then I went to the Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp, which is the home of the Falcone competition, which is still going, very famous. Initially, it was just euphonium. Now it's the euphonium tuba competition annually. And I was judge and guest soloist there. And then I went up to Interlochen, which was American summer school in the north of Michigan. I did all that on my first trip. And while I was at the Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp, I met the brothers Jim and Bill Gray, who are now still the directors, the organizers of the brass band of Battle Creek. Back then, we didn't have a band. They said, we have a dream. We have a dream. Who said that? Oh, Martin Luther King. They had a dream to form a brass band, and they'd been to a Yamaha brass band kind of exposition thing, and they'd heard recordings of the band of the Black Colt. And anyway, so they said, look, next year we'd like to invite you back to play. We're going to form a band. And they made a band of all the best players around, and I guest soloed with them. At Lakeview High School, we had about 600 people. It was a great, great evening, amazing buzz about it. And they invited more guest players, more guest soloists. And I stayed on as a member of the band. And every time they had a guest soloist, the next time they wanted to come back just to play in the band. So that energy from being in the US was just extraordinary, you know. So I was in Japan, as I mentioned earlier. It was 1991. I met up with the Breeze Brass Band. Breeze Brass Band came to the UK in 1996 and played a concert at the Royal Albert Hall before the announcement of the results. And I guested with them. It was amazing. I was playing with CWS Glasgow, as was Roger Webster. And we played with the band about, I don't know where we were drawn, number 10 or something. And then at the end of the day, we played with the Breeze Brass Band, and then the results come out and CWS Glasgow win first prize. So we go back on stage and pick up the trophy. It's a day I shall never forget.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So America and Japan, and then I started getting invitations to other Asian countries. So my first trip to Singapore, it was a military contact, working with all the low brass players of the Singapore Armed Forces. That was amazing. Singapore, first experience.
Yeah.
You know, their base used to be right in the center of Singapore. And then Hong Kong. And a little bit later, I got involved with the Taiwanese scene. The Taiwanese low brass scene is phenomenal. There's so many great teachers there, great players. And then I've been to Australia and New Zealand a couple of times. So you the world, despite the fact that you're on a plane forever, the world becomes a very small place. You know, you get on a plane at Heathrow, 17 hours later, you're in Perth. The next day, you're playing with, you know, the Perth Brass Band.
Yeah.
And everybody in the band world actually is very similar. You know, we play all the same instruments. We often play the same music. We talk about test pieces. We talk about, you know, brass band politics and blah, 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 blah.
Oh, of course.
That's its own little world, you know. But I also have done, as I say, with the Singapore military and other people, do some real kind of ambassador training stuff. And, you know, I get to play solos with the band as well. So that became a way of life. And once I'd stopped teaching at high school, I was really as free as a bird. You know, the RNCM and Birmingham, I could teach any day of the week, so long as I let people know some weeks in advance. So I had this amazing flexibility just to go where I was invited, you know? So, and that was 1991, 92, 93. And here we are 23 years later. I'm still doing exactly the same stuff, you know. The only thing that slowed me down, some of your listeners will probably remember, I guess, is in the summer of 23, I got very ill. I had a big problem with my gut, which insisted on being infected and caused massive weight loss. And that I lost about a year of my life really through that. I was recuperating or struggling or lying in bed. Eventually found a doctor who had a wonder drug, and touch wood, that's all gone and not coming back. So
that's good news. That's good to hear.
And that was straight after, that was just a matter of a year and a half after the pandemic had finished. So I feel there's like a 3 or 4 year hiatus where my spirit was still wanting to keep doing it, but my body said, not sure about this. And of course, in the pandemic, we were all locked down, you know, no traveling, no flying, no concerts, for at least a year and a half. It was amazing. And during that time, I made a ton of videos, education videos, you know, because I knew lots of people were in the same position. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going off the subject slightly, but the international travel became something that I just did, that became normal. People say to me, I don't know how you can just keep getting on a plane and going. I mean, that's awful. I said, no, it's not. It's really not awful at all. Traveling's got more difficult. Travelling with an instrument like the euphonium has got more difficult. Planes have brought in all sorts of restrictions. I used to fly all around Europe with the gig bag, you know, be it EasyJet or Lufthansa or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And then Ryanair came along and spoiled it for everyone, basically. That's too big. You have to check that in. You have to buy a seat. That's, you know, one hand baggage, blah, blah, blah. And so we have to find solutions to that traveling. But long distance traveling, taking the instrument is really easy now, still. Yeah.
I'm going to say, if we go to your recent US tour, I remember when I first contacted you to do this podcast, I think if I remember rightly, you were in Texas when you replied to me.
Yes.
But what stood out about that trip, and were there any performances that felt particularly special for you on your recent tour?
Well, in the last tour I did, which was about 5 weeks ago, it was a 4-stop trip. So 3 Texas universities. Texas is a real hub for brass music, of course, you know, and for music education in generally. Texas is a monster. I mean, the facilities and money and number of bands and high school bands and university bands, it's amazing. So it's always nice to go to Texas because there's lots of good musicians, lots of great teachers and decent funding. So I started off in Waco at Baylor University with a tuba teacher there I've known for many years, invited me. His wife was playing the piano, good students, did a recital, and a masterclass with a lot of people, very good questions. And from there, I went down south. I took the plane to Corpus Christi Airport, which you look on the map is already southern Texas. And then I drove 3 hours, 2.5 hours, even further, right down about 4 miles from the Mexican border.
Yeah.
University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. Very different to the universities around Dallas. You know, it's really close to Mexico, and you feel that. You walk around, you know, most people are speaking Spanish. The weather is really warm. The food is really spicy. So, you know, you have to be careful when you're traveling that you don't fill yourself full of spicy meat and then try and play a recital.
Could just imagine.
And then go ahead.
I was going to say, we've already spoken about the, you know, American brass culture is quite different to the UK tradition. So what differences do you notice when you perform there?
Well, when I perform there, actually the differences are not as great as they were perhaps 30 years ago.
Right.
Where there was a set way that it kind of a euphonium should sound like. And I think because of social media, because of the, you know, music streaming and things, I think we're much more interconnected now. You know, instruments, mouthpieces, what we play, sound concepts, you know, we've become really quite globalized, and not just in the States. You can go to Taiwan and hear people that sound like they're playing in a colliery band in the north of England. You know, in the old days, you know, you would typify Japanese players as using no vibrato, not much dynamic variation, lots of front to the note, very technically accurate, but not much emotion. That's all those traditional differences are going. They've not gone completely.
Right.
But you know what? I met at least at each venue 7 or 8 euphonium players, and if I was blindfolded, I wouldn't be able to tell that they were American players. They were just good players, you know. Some with a very beautiful lyrical approach, depending on their bringing or their teacher. Some more preoccupied a bit with range and things. And you know, I go there as a teacher and as a performer. I very rarely go anywhere and just perform and come home. You know, and I like the mix. What I don't like doing is teaching all day and then playing a concert in the evening.
And then playing a concert, could imagine.
Some days, it just means you have to do that. But
so I'm going to say, talking about your schedule, though, you have a very busy travel schedule. How do you maintain consistency in your playing? Because you go from, like you say, you do the tours, you go to USA, you go to Asia, you're in Europe.
Yeah, well, you have to deal with the jet lag. That's the one big thing that affects everybody. You can minimize it, the first 2 days after arriving or getting back. And some days I'm getting back and I'm going straight to Manchester to teach, and I'm trying to demonstrate, and part of my body is falling asleep because my body clock's in the wrong place. So I think I have a general rule that at all times, just do the best you can. You start with that. So in terms of a tour, I'm a practice junkie. I've always been. I've always loved practicing. I always try and plan way ahead. All the practice I'm doing these days is for 3 or 4 major pieces I'm playing in Thailand.
Right.
I'm starting to practice some pieces for a trip to a Latvia Brass Festival, which is 2 weeks after that. So I have like a rolling schedule.
Yeah.
What I'm not very good at is say, let's do a concert on Saturday. Let's learn these new pieces, because I have to plan ahead. That's where my confidence comes from. I think if you're going to stand in front of people, you better know that you know the music and you're ready. People very quickly work out if you're not.
No, completely agree there. What's been the most unusual venue you've ever performed in?
Okay, well, a couple really. I've been involved with the Jeju Festival in South Korea for many years as artistic director, but also I've conducted a group from Austria called Sound in Brass. Sadly, they're no longer in existence, but we had some amazing trips to Jeju. And one of the venues we played at was in a cave system underground.
Yeah.
So you imagine you're going into this cave, you're walking down with all your instruments, you go down this path, and the temperature outside is like 30 degrees. And you go down into this cave, and suddenly it's like 16 degrees and dark, and you keep walking, and you come to this like amphitheater. Inside, it's a cave, it's underground. Right. And they've got lights up there. And the atmosphere there was incredible. What was also interesting is that because it was a cave, you get drips of water dripping down on the performers while they're playing. So you're playing along and suddenly something drops on your head. As I was conducting that night, so it didn't really bother me, but the timpani, there's a guy with 3 timpani, and every now and then you heard boom, boom, as the drops of water hit on the timpani, So that was pretty memorable place. I mean, I played in lots of phenomenal concert halls in Japan and America, and a beautiful concert hall is a beautiful concert hall. I'm always kind of curious about venues that are not normal, because they're the ones you tend to remember, There's another venue at Jeju, which is called the Seaside place. It's an outdoor concert hall about 200 meters from the sea. Yeah. And in the summer's night, the humidity is like 100%. So you see a band come out on stage, and within 30 seconds, everyone is absolutely dripping wet. And they've got microphones, they've got spotlights, they've got insects buzzing around their head, and it's like, come on, Ed, let's play. Let's see what you got. And I should be doing it this summer with Battle Creek.
Oh, fantastic. So, obviously, we know that you teach at the Royal Northern College of Music. What qualities do you look for in a young euphonium player with real potential?
Well, I think every student has potential. Some have an advantage in that they come into college already thoroughly versed in, for example, brass band technique.
Yes.
They know the repertoire. They have a personal library of 200, 300 pieces. They've probably performed 50 of them already. And that's rare. But we have had 1 or 2 people that have come in to college. If you take, for example, a couple of less recent ones, when Dan Thomas joined the RNCM, he was also went in on second euphonium at Black Dyke pretty much the week that he arrived. Adam Bakaris came from Australia, and came in as a really good player, joined Fairy Band straight away. Of course, he's now at Black Dyke. So, but we also get, apart from young Angus Ritchie, we currently have from Scotland, who's playing second euphonium at Brighouse. He arrived at the age of 17 and a half, already a superstar already. He could play anything. So he's not the finished product, nobody is, but they have a great advantage because of what they've been through before they've got there. So we have students who, as I say, many Asian students who come from Hong Kong, Taiwan, China. And what they have is an absolutely unrelenting guide to practice, attitude to practice. They practice and they practice. And you can see week by week, a kid can actually learn a concerto in a week from me giving them the music because they're practicing for 6 hours a day. So that's really impressive. The qualities of any euphonium player, you need a good sound, you need a good range, you need a good technique, you need good flexibility, and you need to think like a musician. Now, anyone from any country could have that, Yes. Some come to Manchester to learn it. They've had some good tuition, they're motivated. They come to the Holy Grail of euphonium playing in Manchester, and they want to go back enriched, charged up, ready for becoming a leader or a soloist in their own country. So it's hard work and dedication, but it's also really thinking what it means to be a musician. You have to listen to music. I have to be able to say to a student, tell me the different recordings you've heard of this piece. Tell me which one you prefer. Why? What was it about? I'd like to have conversations about sound, about the personality of players. And I think I think we're losing it a little bit. We have lots of students that want to come and study, but there's not many students I can sit down and have a real discussion with about those things. If when I was 16, I had a few people, that I could talk to. Jeff Otter, who was the bandmaster of Boscombe Salvation Army. He used to come into my school to teach percussion. And we used to talk about bands and about test pieces and about sounds and phrasing. And, I don't really see that happening quite as much, even though it's never been easier to listen to a wide range of music on your phone with some headphones. Yes. But I don't think people really listen. I think they acknowledge it's there or whatever. I think often players are too busy doing stuff to actually think about what they're doing. It's almost every musician I know is busy. Oh, I can't do that. I have a rehearsal. I can't come to that. I have to practice. And we need downtime. When I was a student at Bristol University, I used to spend about 2 hours a day in the listening library. Well, it was pretty low tech. It was about 5 record players, and then a shelf full of records of classical music and a few odds and sods. But we used to sit there and listen to music. Just putting the stylus on the thing and just sit there for hours following the scores. That for me was real musical, understanding that powers me. And I was 19 then, so we're talking 45 years ago. And I still remember the effect of that kind of musical study. And I don't think students do it. I don't see many people doing that kind of hard graft, I suppose I'd call it.
No, completely agree. That goes on to my next question. Has the standard of young players globally changed over the last 20 years?
Yeah, sure. Certainly for the euphonium. I can't say it has for trumpet or trombone because a lot of these instruments already had amazing facilities and teachers going back certainly 50 years. But the rise in euphonium talent, I honestly, in the last 20 years has been remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. You may say, well, bloody hell, Steve, why do we need so many euphonium players? They can't all teach. But, and it's a good question. I have to reconcile myself. But I would say in every country, look at China, for example. Now, what do we know about Chinese euphonium playing? Not very much. You ask the average person, well, lots of cheap instruments come from China, blah, blah, end of story. But no, the Chinese story is actually amazing.
Yeah.
Their instruments now are very well made in state-of-the-art factories. They have really good euphonium teachers. They have conferences that are attended by hundreds of young players with their parents, which are fantastically well organized. I went to one in Wuhan about 7 months ago, and there was 1,200 students there at this place for 4 days, 180 euphonium players, 600 trombone players, 400 trumpet players, 200 French horn players. And they were good. I mean, and there were master classes and people stood up and played, and the students asked intelligent questions. You know, it's like, never ever think that, you know, well, we do things best in the United Kingdom. You really shouldn't say that too much. Look at the way the European Championships and nearly always won by foreign bands. Anyway. So the Chinese are coming, all the Asian countries, because they work hard and they invest. They have money, which smart people invest in tuition and music and, you know, and competitions and festivals, competitions. So, South Korea, the standard has risen amazingly, even in the last 10 years. Taiwan has been amazing for 25 years, and the last 5 years, it's got better and better. Hong Kong, I have about 12 ex-students in Hong Kong, all making a living with euphonium just on the small island of Hong Kong. Well, that's pretty impressive.
That is impressive.
Singapore, Malaysia is coming on. I'm visiting there in September. But then all around Europe, the Italian scene is fantastic. The German scene is developing. The Spanish scene for euphonium, Portugal, incredible players, incredible creative talents, playing interesting music. You know, they're not so interested in the old solos that we go round and round and round in the UK. They want new stuff. They want local composers. The scene in Finland is amazing. Norway is one of the shining examples to the world of how they do brass, you know, brass bands and wind bands and commission new pieces, and, you know, a lot of them quite serious. France is amazing. It's a big creative country. So many small ensembles, so many talented euphonium players. So it's an amazing time. If I think if I could have described the euphonium scene when I was leaving high school in 1980, if I'd have known, I'd have said, it's all pretty quiet. Some of the best players join military bands around the world. The rest just play in bands, and that's it. What about repertoire? Not much available. We play trumpet music, we play trombone music. And if you look at the change now, since from then, you know, a 50-year change, it's the most remarkable development, I think, of any wind instrument. You know, the trumpet and the trombone, and to some extent the tuba, and definitely the horn. They had a head start. They had 100-year head start. Yeah. But I reckon we've caught them up and overtaken them by now.
I was going to say, talking about repertoire, you've premiered countless new works.
Yeah.
So why is commissioning new music so important to you?
Yeah, because when I was young and university, I just didn't feel that we had enough people engaged in writing for the euphonium, because there weren't that many opportunities where people could actually play original music, you know?
Yeah.
You look at the associated board lists, you know, it was the Iceberg, it was the Horowitz, it was Gordon Jacob, and those pieces were set in stone, you know? And so, you know, as Harvey Phillips said to the tuba world, don't expect that people are just going to write tuba music one day. If you don't go out and make it happen, it's not going to happen. That was his philosophy, which I got early on in life. And so it wasn't really a question of today I shall commission 5 pieces. It was more, I was so active and prolific in the 90s and the noughties, is that composers would come to me and say, I'd like to write a euphonium sonata. Oh, I've just arranged this. Would you be interested if I wrote this? And because I recorded it and got it published, usually by one of the publishing houses, that's all they wanted, you know. If I drew up a list of all the pieces that I've commissioned and actually paid money for, it would be a frighteningly small list. But
Right.
I've commissioned pieces or it's been collaborations with composers
Yeah.
who said, I'd like to do a piece. We can get it performed by my wind band, blah, blah, blah. Fantastic. Let's do it. So, you know, the only piece I've ever paid decent money, let's say over a couple of £1,000, was the concerto I commissioned from Philip Spark, the Omagio concerto. You know, others small, £300, £200, £600. But everyone has found its way in the music world. And I like to think that when a composer wrote for me, you know, 20 years ago, and now that piece is still available, still play it. It's on an exam list. It's on a competition list.
Yeah.
And I can look at, I think the rate of new compositions perhaps has slowed down a little bit in the last 5 years, post-pandemic. People haven't had the money to spend on big commissions, frankly, but I'm hoping that's going to open up again now.
Yeah,
So-
no, exactly. Is there a piece you truly feel changed the perception of the euphonium?
Well, I mean, you have to go back to the Horowitz Concerto in 72, which
Okay.
Trevor Groom performed at the Albert Hall. A euphonium playing a concerto. I mean, back then it was like, oh my God, how on earth is someone going to play for so long? You know? And then you get a quality work. And then you get composers like Peter Graham, Philip Wilby, Martin Ellerby,
Yeah.
Bach, and then the international composers, Torstein Agar Nielsen, Bert Appelmont, and so forth and so forth. So I think a few important pieces like that actually just open the floodgates for composers to say, look, there are thousands of euphonium players out there. Many of them are very good. If we write good pieces, they're going to play them.
Yeah.
And it's good for them. And that's, so as it turned out, you know, how many people have played the Kerno Rhapsody for euphonium? Tens of thousands. Everywhere I go, people play the Kerno Rhapsody. I've almost yet to find an original copy. They all tend to be flipping photocopies. But anyway, and how many young euphonium players, you know, don't aspire to play pantomime? You know, it's amazing what certain key works have done to popularize and become ambitions for players, you know. I want to play this next year. I want to play Harlequin. I want to play, you know, I want to play the Ellerby Concerto. I want to play Wilby, you know, and Peter Graham's new stuff, Force of Nature. You know, it's flying off the shelf in my shop because they hear David Chance playing it brilliantly and they go, well, I could do that. So they think. and they buy the music. So, you know, that's great. That's good for everyone. And it gets recorded and, you know, as I say, the sad thing for me is the way that the recording industry has collapsed on itself because of streaming, you know, and I understand the streaming thing.
Yes.
The amount of money that artists get now from being on Spotify or iTunes is pitifully small, contrasted with the money that these companies make. But that's that, you know, that's business, that's life. You have to kind of shrug your shoulders. If you want to make a recording now, you basically need to get all the production costs financed by somebody.
Yes, of course, of course.
An organization, a publishing house, you know, a private benefactor. And I don't think we'll ever turn the clock back. We're never going to see CDs coming back. I think there's more chance that vinyl will come back than there is CDs.
I probably will agree there. I mean, talking about recording, you've got your discography is extensive. Do you approach recording differently than a live performance?
Yes, because it's not live, but, and because in a live performance you'd never play 65 minutes of music without a break. But all the recordings I made, you know, in the glory days of me making CDs was when I was teaming up with Studio Music and Polyphonic. You know, the boss was Stan Kitchen, God rest his soul. And the recording team consisted of Mike Moore, who was the sound recording genius, and Philip Spark was the producer.
Oh, wow.
So I made 25 discs with them, different combinations, British Tuba Quartet, solo albums with the Fairy Band, solo albums with Michigan State Band, British Tuba Quartet, World of the Euphonium series with piano. And they were amazing days. It was never like, do you fancy making a CD? It would always be, I've got so many great pieces that I've got now, I'm ready to make a CD. And Philip Spark and I, we talked, and we're still obviously the best of friends. We lost Mike Moore, over 10 years ago, which was a shame because he was one of the very best in the business ever. But with a CD recording, it has to be perfect. If you go into a studio unable to play even one bar, you're going to be in trouble. So you've got to be prepared. You've got to be physically prepared because, usually a recording, I could do everything pretty much in 2 days. So you're dependent on a lot of factors. The band is equally prepared. If it's a band one with a conductor who understands what you want tempo-wise.
Yes.
If it's a pianist, he or she has to stay healthy and strong and able to concentrate and also be prepared. You've got to be in a venue that has no technical problems, creaking floorboards, and traffic with noise and stuff.
Yeah.
There's so many things potentially that could go wrong. So I've had an amazing recording career. I don't know if I'll record any more. Maybe one. I don't know. But my list is over 120 CDs in total. And that was all between 1990 and 2 years ago, So, it's preparation is the key of practicing everything perfectly. And then when you get into a studio, I never one, unless it's a short piece, never one for saying, right, we're going to play the whole thing straight through. And it's the band makes errors. I make some mistakes. Oh, let's do it again. I mean, really, you say we're going to go from bar 1 to 40. Bang. We're going to do it again. Okay, one thing to fix. We move on. So finding a way to actually get everything done in the time is one of the biggest skills. So long as you don't pick music that's too difficult, that you can't play or whatever, And I had
you prepared.
I had the most remarkable CD in terms of timing was the CD Bravura that I made with the Fairy Band and Howard Snell conducting. So it had 2 concertos, the Cosma and Golan 2, and about 6 other pieces. It was a big, heavy CD. Only 2, maybe 3 of the pieces were light. The other pieces were really important. And we recorded at the University of Manchester. We started on time, 9:30. The red light went on. By 10:45, the first concerto was finished. Right, we're going to do the second concerto. By lunchtime, we got that done as well. So it was 1 o'clock, 2 concertos. And then we recorded, and about 3:30, the producer comes on and says, you realize we've only got 2 more pieces left to do. Do you want to stop now and come back tomorrow? And of course, the whole band looked at me as if to say, keep going, Steve. We can do this. and about 4:45, we finished the last piece. We got the whole album done in 1 day, which I've never done in my life. Honestly, I could not do it now.
One day, that's impressive.
It was one of those days where absolutely everything went right. Howard Snell, although he was getting a little older then, was absolutely in control. Right, we're going to do the beginning. Right, and again, ready, everybody? He didn't waste 1 second,
Yeah.
And he went home. He went back to the Isle of Man that night. He got an early flight. He was happy. His wife was happy because she got her husband back. The band had a free day. I had a little bit to do on the second day, some multi-tracking. Is when we did Moto Perpetual. So I had to go and just to do that. But no, I mean, recording was a real passion of mine. And I'm sad that I don't, at the moment, have any recordings to look forward to. But watch this space. Now that my health now that my health is pretty much back to normal, maybe something for, where are we now? Maybe for the end of the year, I can think of one more recording to do before I hang it up.
Well, let's hope so. On the recording side, if someone is discovering your music for the first time, which recording do you think they should start with?
That's a good idea. I mean, it's a good question. If it was a general listener, then there was an album called The Essential Steven Mead, which I also did with the Fairy Band, which is now on streaming services. It was under the World of Brass umbrella, but they released it with 5 other of my albums that they had onto streaming services. That has traditional brass band pieces, some classical arrangements, some beautiful melodies. The Essential Steven would be like a calling card. Pretty much everything I love to do, without it being too complex, is on that disc. You know, if it's somebody who was interested in euphonium and piano, then any of the World of the Euphonium, again on polyphonic World of Brass, any of those 6 would be fun. I met a composer, Vladimir Kozma. I mentioned his name earlier on. He was commissioned to write a big concerto for the euphonium for a competition. In the competition, I was sitting next to him on the jury, and first performance came, standing ovation for Mr. Kozma, and he sat down, and I said, "That's amazing. That's your first piece for euphonium." He said, "Yes." I didn't know anything about the euphonium. And I said, "But you understand it." I said, "How did you find out?" And he said, "Well, the organizers gave me one of your CDs, and I listened to it to find out." And I said, "Well, which one was it?" And he said, "World of the Euphonium, Volume 1, just the first album I did with piano." And it's not really a groundbreaking one. It has 1 or 2 modern pieces. The piano sound is not great. It was recorded in my village church on a Steinway A, or little Steinway piano. Anyway, he learned everything about the euphonium. So that was, for me, a touching moment, that this great concerto emanating from a man who'd only heard the euphonium, with me playing with piano. That was so, I mean, if people are listening, you can find a lot of my stuff on Spotify or Amazon Music or iTunes, just by putting in my name, maybe euphonium. And if you subscribe to World of Brass, they still have quite a few pieces of mine that you won't find on streaming services at the moment.
Right, we'll do a quick fun segment. This is I've called it Rapid Fire, the Soloist Live. So it's just only 5, just quick answers. Dream composer to write a euphonium concerto.
Oh my goodness. Living or past?
Up to you.
Elgar.
Favorite country to perform
in? Probably Japan. Yes.
Nice. Strangest place you've practiced?
Oh my God. On an aeroplane, public conveniences. I mean, honestly, on the beach. I could draw
on the beach.
Yeah. In Malaysia. Yeah. In fact, it was about a week after I got my new gold lacquered instrument. My hotel in Malaysia, I couldn't play in the hotel. The walls were paper thin. And so I walked on the beach, and I kept walking, and there was a lady, trumpet lady, came with me, took some pictures. So I've got evidence, and I just played on the beach, and it was about 28 degrees. It was late afternoon. The most beautiful practice room you could ever imagine. The acoustic wasn't really too bad.
Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. One non-brass hobby people might not expect.
I do a lot of e-biking. I would say cycling, but people know that I have an e-bike. So even today, as the temperatures got over 11 degrees, I love cycling. For me, it's getting out in the country. It's good for my breathing. It clears any stuff I've got in my head. I can just go and cycle for an hour.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I love fishing, and I love kayaking. I think cycling, fishing, and kayaking in that order, probably.
Fantastic. And last one, if you weren't a musician, what do you think you'd be?
Oh, my God. You see, that's such a hard question. I think I'd be in the arts. I would think I would be because I've done a lot of work with mouthpiece design. I would do a creative designer of something.
Of something. That's fantastic answer. We're nearly at the end. We've just some closing questions now for you. So after decades at the top of your profession, what still excites you about picking up the euphonium?
Yeah, it's just the daily challenge of making this beautiful thing come to life, you know. It's this harmony of your experience, considerable experience, your joy of playing, and this inanimate object, the euphonium, which you have to bring to life every day. The challenge of, I always say, try and play better every day. Now, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you can do that. You can actually feel you're getting better. The challenge when you're, you know, at the good old age of 64 is that you're trying, I guess, to maintain, but you're trying to get better. You know, it's a little bit like swimming upstream. You know, it's fine if you keep swimming hard, you can maintain a good position in the river. Yeah. For sure as hell, if you lie on your back and look at the stars, you're going to float out to sea. So I would say for all brass players, you know, imagine practicing is like swimming up a river. You just have to do it. You have to do it well. You have to refine your techniques. You have to be imaginative, and disciplined. But,
All right. What one piece of advice would you give to young players listening to this podcast right now?
Follow your dream. If you dream to be a great player, not necessarily a professional, try to get the best advice. Try to copy players that you respect. Be ambitious without becoming big-headed. Keep grounded, but practice and enjoy it, and try to enjoy the whole process. We play a musical instrument. It's a kind of game. So win or lose, you've got to keep smiling. Otherwise, do something else.
Absolutely. And the last one. What is next for you? Tours, recordings, projects that we should be keeping an eye out for?
Well, I'm off to a festival in Thailand. I think some of it is going to be live streamed. That's at the end of this month. And then a brass festival in Riga, in Latvia. I'm going to be involved with the European Championships, doing some live comments for 4 Bars Rest from Linz. I'm going a day early to do some coaching for some Austrian brass teachers. And then in the summer, Brass Band of Battle Creek are the guest band at the Jeju Festival, which is amazing. So I'm playing with them in May. And if you catch this podcast in America and you don't know the Brass Band of Battle Creek, then check out bbbc.net. bbbc.net. Find out all about the concerts. It's really an amazing organization. And then the next really big one on the horizon, I'm doing a tour of Asia with a pianist from the 4th to the 20th of September.
Fantastic.
7 different countries. That's the plan. Still got 3 countries to slot the dates into place. So, yeah, it's busy, but, you know, as everyone's told me, I'm not getting any younger, so I shouldn't overdo it. I shouldn't stress myself too much. And I'm just starting to take advice a little bit with regard to that.
Well, Steven, thank you so much for joining us on episode 7 of the Harworth Brass Podcast. It's been an absolute privilege to hear your stories. If you've enjoyed this episode, and we know you will have, make sure you explore more of Steve's incredible work. Visit his official website at euphonium.net, where you can find details of his recordings, publications, tours, masterclasses, and recommended listening. Whether you're a brass band fan, a euphonium player, or simply someone who loves great music, there is so much more to discover. Thank you for listening to the Harworth Brass Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, share the episode, and leave us a review. and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Pete. It's great.